Welcome to the Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, the weekly show where science meets soul and mom chaos meets mind mastery. You're not just a mom. You're a woman with dreams, a career, a body that needs care, and a soul that craves more. This podcast is your permission slip to stop surviving and start thriving in motherhood, health, career, and stress resilience. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Rath, and every week we bring you actionable insights and transformative conversations to help you create a life you truly love. From evidence-based wellness strategies to authentic self-discovery, we'll explore what it takes to thrive through expert interviews and real unfiltered stories. Let's dive into today's episode. Today, you guys are in for a treat. We have Hunter Clarke-Fields. She is a dynamic, engaging speaker who captivates audiences on TV and in front of thousands worldwide. She has sold over 750,000 books worldwide and has over 4 million podcast downloads herself. With over 2 decades of meditation experience, Hunter has taught mindfulness to thousands, empowering parents, individuals globally, and her expertise has been featured on major platforms like NBC, Fox, The Huffington Post, and so much more. She has her own podcast, the Mindful Mama podcast, and has books as well. Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Ashley.
I'm so glad. I was listening to one of your podcasts on my way to work to kind of refresh my information download. But for those of us that maybe are just being introduced to you, kind of tell us how you got to where you are, who you are, how you got to the mindful communication and mindful parenting. You have, Raising Good Humans book. Where did you start and how did you get to where you are?
Well, I was more or less just being a mom to my kids. I had decided to stay home to have my first child, and I'd been a teacher and a painter before then. And anyway, all the work I do with raising good humans and the mindful parenting course and the teacher training, all that stuff, it comes from where I was struggling, where I was failing, where I was really having a hard time. My temper came out when she was like 18 months old, to, started talking back. She's a highly sensitive kiddo, always has been. And she had some major issues with the way I was parenting her. I definitely had some postpartum anxiety. And anyway, I was yelling and I was really frustrated and seeking out help, and really seeking out a lot of help, but realizing that, you know, that all this good advice about parenting a toddler, that it was kind of useless if I couldn't get my temper under control, if I couldn't regulate myself. And so I had started reading and studying about mindfulness when I was a teenager, desperate for some help, because go figure, I'm also very highly sensitive. And so I realized I had to kind of dive back into that world. And so it all comes from tools that I desperately needed. And then I started sharing, and then I started sharing in bigger ways, in different ways. And so, and talking about my anger and my temper, which was, I think, kind of a relief for other people to hear. It's so taboo for especially women to talk about. So yeah, and I've been educating myself and learning and studying since then. But yeah, it all comes from where I was bad. I was bad at it.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. You mentioned like mindful parenting. So what is that? And what does that actually look like in the middle of the grocery store during a meltdown?
Well, mindfulness is an incredible tool in parenting because, we talk a lot. I think today's buzzword more is like emotional regulation, right? We talk
Mm.
about
Mm-hmm.
emotional regulation a lot. And kids' emotional regulation is impossible to achieve if you can't have your own emotional regulation as a parent. Like, you can't expect them to calm down if you can't. And in the world of mindfulness, there's a lot of tools that have been around for a very long time to help us regulate when we're dysregulated, to help us
Mm-hmm.
practice calm, practice groundedness, practice being non-reactive is kind of how I like to think about it, is like that we're exercising this muscle of non-reactivity. So when we're at our worst, when we're parenting, if we're at that grocery store and the kid's in a meltdown and we're reactive, we might be yelling, we might be grabbing, we might be saying or just saying something that's really unskillful that our parents might have said to us, like maybe some kind of threat or whatever that isn't such a skillful thing. And these aren't ways that we have thought through.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't thoughtful reactions to our kids. These aren't thoughtful responses. And so mindful parenting is really about helping us to get to that place where we can respond thoughtfully, and then, and take care of our feelings using all those tools, and then also kind of what to say as well after we're able to sort of regulate ourselves. So then if we're if we want a skillful version of the grocery store, you might say, okay, my kid's melting down. You might first turn to yourself. Oh my God. I'm Dr. Ashley can see I'm putting my hand to my heart. Like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so embarrassed. I'm feeling so stressed, right? Like, I'm going to acknowledge what my feelings are. This is a mess. So then if I'm looking at myself, I'm saying, I'm embarrassed, I'm stressed. I then have some choices. Like, I can either use some resources right there to calm myself, or I might say, I feel like I'm going to lose it if this is a little crazy, and I think we're going to leave. And we're going to turn that shopping cart with that screaming toddler, and we're going to, as we're leaving, and we're going to, get to the car and then take some moments there to calm down, or to calm down in the grocery store. It may be, somebody is practicing these things and doesn't have such a skillful reaction, maybe does say something unskillful at the grocery store, but then realizes it maybe a little more quickly than they would have in their earlier timeline, and says, oh my goodness, whew, that was such a stressful moment. You know what? I want to do a do-over. I'm sorry I yelled. I didn't mean to say it like that. This is what I'd like to say instead. Give me a sec. Let me just, whatever you need to do, shake it out. This is not an emergency, and then do it again. So it's really about like continually starting again, offering ourselves some compassion, but utilizing practices to calm our reactivity and to communicate more skillfully.
Yeah, you hit a lot of nuggets that I feel like I've gotten better at, but still definitely need to improve. So I'm gonna back up a little bit.
Sure.
So why is it that we lose our marbles so easily? What is actually happening in the brain when, your kid's throwing the tantrum, or, a glass of milk is spilled and suddenly you're a freaking lunatic? You're like, oh my gosh, like how am I responding like that? Like, I don't do that at work. Like, why am I so triggered right now? So what's actually happening from like a nerdy neurological stress standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really important for us to understand that these aren't responses we have chosen. Like
Mm,
no one's ever choosing to yell at their child. No one's ever choosing to lose it. No one made a conscious choice to lose it. And so I think that's really important to understand, because we're really hard on ourselves when we think it's like willpower, or I'm a terrible person, or something like that.
mm-hmm,
And it's really important to understand that it's not that. You're not making a conscious choice. So what's happening instead in the brain is your nervous system is seeing your child as a threat. You may have, depending on you have different stressors and triggers in your life, and you may have had maybe a lot of stress in that day, right? So it doesn't take that much to even push you. Maybe you haven't had a lot of sleep, and if you're anything like me, I respond really, really terribly to everyone in my orbit if I haven't had enough sleep.
Yep,
Um,
guilty.
yeah, maybe, you're not taking care of yourself in different ways because of life circumstances, right? So there are things that can increase our nervous system's ability to kind of tip into its reactive fight, flight, or freeze stress response, right? Where we may become more aggressive and things like that. Or there can be things that are, so there could be stressors like hunger and sleep and just life stress, etc. Kids are loud and messy and frustrating. Their behavior is really very frustrating. And but there are also things that are triggers that maybe, we want to be aware of, could be from our childhood. Like you mentioned, milk spill. That there was a person in mindful parenting, and when her toddler spilled her stuff on the floor, it produces very outsized reaction from her. It
Mm.
really drove her bonkers. And we do the work to kind of explore that, what is that? And she realized that, oh, when she was little, there was a big emphasis on appearance, etc. And so when her house wasn't looking just so, when her toddler was doing normal toddler behavior and messed it up, it it triggered something more than just, oh yuck, there's a mess. It triggered a deep kind of feeling of worthiness, etc.,
Mm.
because of her own upbringing. So it can be as simple as I'm hungry. It can be as deep as something from my childhood, but it really helps to understand that. And then you wanted to get nerdy into the, what is happening in those moments. Our amygdala, which is the emotional centers of our brain, they're two almond shaped clusters in the brain stem. They're kind of the oh crap centers of the brain. They're preparing you to fight, flight, or freeze. So what they are literally doing is they're kind of bypassing the prefrontal cortex area of our brain, which is behind our forehead, which is responsible for impulse control, creativity, verbal ability, problem solving, right? Like these are all the things we want to be able to
Mm-hmm.
parent effectively. But the amygdala is perceiving a threat. And so in order to keep us safe from a threat, you want to have quick reactions. This is the part of the brain we're very grateful for when we just reach out our hand and pull our kid back from the street. But it's also part of the brain that makes it so that you actually can't access the thoughtful, slower part of your brain in that moment. You have to, everyone, we all have to prioritize calming ourselves down, regulating ourselves if we want a chance of using the slower parts of our brain, if we want to you remember that great thing to say or whatever it is, way to respond to our kid. Because when the amygdala and the stress response nervous system gets involved, it's really like it's kind of hijacking the brain and you're impaired.
Yeah. And I would say that's true for your child too, right? Like if they're
Definitely.
having the meltdown, if they, are having the tantrum or, the behavior, big emotions, they're not necessarily teachable in that moment because their brain is being hijacked by, whatever it is that's causing the tantrum or the transition or whatnot. But so it's both of those lanes, both the parent and the child, where you have to understand like neurologically we cannot learn right now and we are going to be very like animalistic and reactive
Mhm.
in those moments. And it's not until we can have that mindfulness or calmness where we can be in a teachable moment. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons why yelling is just not a very skillful choice anyway. Like it doesn't work because if a large adult yells at a child, it's scary. And then if they're scared, their stress response nervous system is kicking in, and then their fight, flight, or freeze behaviors are like yelling and kicking and spitting and pushing and hitting, right? Like that's that's what fight, flight, or freeze looks like in a really dysregulated little kid. So like all these behaviors that we're trying to stop, we're perpetuating. So it's really important to just understand that we think of ourselves as so independent, but human species, we are inter-are, and we feel our kids' feelings, they feel our feelings. They need us to help, you've we talk about co-regulation, right? Like they need
Mm-hmm.
to be able to borrow our calm. So that's another reason why practicing to, prioritize taking care of ourselves, prioritize taking care of our nervous system, to prioritize stopping maybe a few times a day and just taking a breath and pausing, that becomes the best thing you can do for your kid, for their nervous system and yours.
I would agree. And then I'm going to play devil's advocate
Mm-hmm.
of some people think that like mindful parenting is too soft. It's like letting your kids run the house. Like if I don't, and and not in like an abusive way, right? Like we're I feel like these parents are good parents, but what do you say, or I should say they have good intention, like they're
Mm-hmm.
loving, overall kind people, but they're like, sometimes my kid, like for the most part, maybe I don't yell, but occasionally it's like I raise my voice. So what do you say to those parents that think that this might just be soft, or we're not disciplining enough, or that toughness is maybe being lost?
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I don't. I do yell sometimes, although my kids are 15 and 18 now. But I
Yeah.
think that, first of all, I just want to clarify that it doesn't mean that you're always perfect and you're always perfectly
Yeah.
calm. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that at all. Like, it means you're practicing to become more skillful more of the time.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
practicing to, because you're human and you're going to be human, you're going to lose it. And actually, your kids kind of need to see you have bad days, and they need to see you mess up, and they need to hear you maybe apologize to them, right? So they can see all those behaviors modeled, how to
Mm.
be a good human, how to
Mhm.
regulate. Like if you're always some perfect Dalai Mama on a cloud, that's completely unrelatable. And that would be sort of frustrating, I imagine, as a kid, because
Yeah.
the kid is a normal human being. And, mom would seem sort of fake if they never have any upset feelings, and they would be faking it, because we have upset feelings as humans. So just to say that, yeah, I mean, I'm not here to tell, I mean, I'm not here to like dictate any specific way of, I want parents to take these tools and parent their kids in the way that they feel comfortable parenting their kids,
Mm.
right? I want people to say, "Oh, okay, like if I'm yelling, my kid goes into fight, flight, or freeze. They can't learn what it is I want them to learn in that moment. So, okay, so then I'm going to maybe try not to yell more of the time so that my kid can actually learn what they want to learn, right?" It's I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong or bad. Sometimes a kid needs to be who knows, like they're using things like yelling or power, like I'm going to take away this, or you're going to be in timeout, or different things like that. The, I see them as not that skillful, because I know that as the more we use power, the less influence we have. And so when we force kids into things, it generally causes them to resent us. And then as resentment builds, they become less likely to want to cooperate with us. So what I encourage is like, let's try to connect. Let's talk about, what do you need? What do I need? And let's figure out how to resolve problems that way. That can be really wonderful way. But also, yes, hold some boundaries. Of course. I'm very frustrated, with a permissive side. Mindful parenting is very much of the middle path, right? But in a permissive side, a parent might resent the kids because the kids are always sort of getting their way. And parents need to hold boundaries around their needs. They need to hold boundaries around things like screen time, right? They need to
Mm.
hold boundaries
Yes. Say that again.
on all kinds of things. Like I tell my 15-year-old to put her knee down at dinner every single night. I'm amazed that I still have to ask her to do this, but Yeah, and there's some that I've not done so well. The backpack remains stubbornly by the door,
Mm,
despite I've seen some
mhm.
parenting influencers of very small children who somehow figure that out. I have not personally figured that one out, and they're 15 and 18. But when it on the end of the day, what it comes down to is you're in a relationship with your kids for your whole life, right?
Mm,
And when we use tactics like yelling, hitting, aggression tactics that are about controlling behavior, first and foremost, what happens and what we've seen happen historically is that kids resent that over time. And then they get to a time when they're like adolescents and parents have less control over them because the kids have more freedom, and the parents have lost all influence. The kids, there's like the teen rebellion idea. The teens are not rebelling against parents. They're rebelling against these destructive tactics that they've used because the tactics have destroyed the loving, connected relationship. If parents can practice to listen to their kids at different parts of all throughout their life, even maybe when they're holding a boundary, right? They're listening to whatever reactions their kids are having, and maybe understand if they can listen, if you can create connection, if you can practice tools that don't push away your kids, that are
mhm,
ultimately actually more effective, then you can have influence when your kids really, really need you to be there, which is when they're adolescents. Because I have to tell you, as a parent of adolescents, bigger kids, bigger problems is true. That when you have an adolescent, it's not as incessant, but they have bigger issues to deal with. And you want to be there as a influence, as a trusted source in their life, to be there for them in that time.
mm. So the younger, like, start now, you're saying, to all the people with littles. It'll make the teenage years easier.
Yes, actually, it does get easier and easier. As time goes on, it can be really hard to relearn, like maybe changing the language of threats and punishment. That's really hard. It's really hard to relearn that. It can be really hard to learn things like iMessages and
Can you give us a couple examples of, let's say, yelling or threats or like power things, like small examples, and then how to like quickly shift that language or pattern?
sure, sure. Yeah. So, for example, say there's like toys all over the floor.
Mm,
You might say, someone might traditionally say, like, clean up all your toys, right? Like, and a lot of times, in general, kids are, especially toddlers, have a lot of orders and commands barked at them all day long, and they tend to resent it. So, we could ask them in a nicer way, hey, it's time to clean up your toys. Say they don't want to, you know. In a traditional paradigm, a parent might say something like, if you don't clean up all your toys, you're going to lose your screen time. And in what you might say from a mindful parenting perspective, you might use something like an iMessage. Like, you might still, instead, you might still have the screen time as a when the toys are done, we can have that. But you might say, hey, this floor is a mess, and I feel stressed out, and I can't walk over across the floor when I'm going to get things on my feet when all these toys are here. How do you want to clean it up? Right? So we might say something like that. Say our kid is in a ornery mood, or isn't for some reason is in the habit of, maybe we've been unskillful for a while and they're in the habit of resisting you, and so now they're going to resist anything you say. It takes a little while for those things to turn around.
mm-hmm,
Then you might just stop and wait, right? Like, wait. And it's, you want to do your screen time now? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, hun, the toys aren't cleaned up, we got to do that first. So rather than making it a threat, rather than doing something that's like a direct command, you can kind of hear in what I'm saying, that it's more like, if I had a respected auntie over my house, or you're a kid, my kid wasn't my kid, but your kid. How would I say it if someone else's kid were in the situation, right?
Mm,
So
mhm,
when we can sort of shift our language to and plus what's beautiful about this is that it models more respectful language, right? Like we've all maybe had that moment where we hear a sibling saying barking orders at their younger sibling, right? I definitely had that moment. I was like, oh no, that's what I sound like. And that's paired with so that's paired with, so basically when I have a problem or I have a boundary, like there's a mess in the living room, I'm going to tell my kid how this makes me feel and how it affects me. And
mm,
because our relationship is pretty close, they're going to care that that affects me. If this is a problem that is ongoing because toys are hard to clean up and we have a lot of toys, might say, okay, then I might do some other steps like this is obviously too much for my kid. What can my kid put away by themselves in 5 minutes? I'm going to, make a toy closet and put 70% of these toys in that toy closet and just have some out that my kid can clean up by themselves, and then I can switch them in and out, and then they feel like new toys every time. So I'm going to simplify my environment to make it easier for my kid to be able to be a contributing member of the family too.
mm. I love that. Yeah. I feel like I go in spurts and it comes back to me all the time of how our conversation started of like when I am fueled, when my cup
Hmm.
is full, I can parent better. I have more patience, I have more critical thinking, I'm firing in my prefrontal cortex. I can, start to like my communication's better because I'm not so snappy. I'm not in a survival mode myself. And so
Yes.
I love that conversation where we started and kind of going full circle of it's got to start with you, which I think is really hard
Hmm.
for a lot of moms because I think it's generational. I think like we always were just showed like you get everything else done and if there's time left for you then work on yourself. But there's this shift of like how self-care is not selfish. It's actually a form of leadership, in my opinion,
Hmm.
and
I like that.
how we teach our kids that. And so, going back to yourself and a mother's, because that's typically who's listening, or fathers, it applies to both of us. But how much do you think as a parent is just repeating the crap that we picked up from our childhoods? And not just crap, like, right? I have
Good
incredible
stuff too.
parents that I love
Yeah.
and they have showered me with so much that I've learned, but every generation wants to do better, right? So are most of us just running on old software if we're not being diligent about it?
I mean, we're running on old software and sort of we're swimming in the sea of our culture, right?
Mm,
So, what are parents around you doing? What do you hear said in the playground? All those different things. Those are, you know, going back to the idea of like toddlers hear orders and commands a million times a day. Put on your shoes, take off your shoes, get in the car, get out of the car, put your shirt on, take your shirt off, all of these things. These are things that, yeah, was our childhood and also what is the culture around us that we're seeing. Yeah, there's no very, very few people take classes in parenting. And it is one of those things where we're like, I don't know, we take classes to learn how to drive and for tennis, but we don't do it for parenting, and we are just kind of often repeating patterns. I was at I remember like walking behind some young dad and his toddlers in a wagon. He said, "Oh, if you hit your brother, I'm gonna bop you one," or something. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's definitely what his parents said to him." It wasn't like
mhm,
thought out about that. Yeah, there is a lot of repetition, and it's hard to change old patterns, but we do have neuroplasticity. I mean, that's like the good news is that what we practice grows stronger. You may have practiced not taking care of yourself for however many years, right? Or may not that not being a priority. But this is a tough job. You need to be you need to be ready and resourced to be a parent of children, to be able to model what you want them to learn. So maybe it's time to practice something new so that you can show them that life doesn't end when they have children, right? You don't want them to get that message inadvertently and think, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And yeah, and I think that us showing up for them, like, it may feel weird, to say, "Okay, I'm going by myself to take a walk," right?
Uh-huh.
I'm leaving my phone at home and I'm going for a walk. And it may feel strange or indulgent to do that, but that's and if you can come back refreshed and present. I One of my teachers, and I've studied his work for a very long time, was the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, and he has this beautiful quote, and he says that when you love someone, the best thing you can offer them is your presence. How
Mm.
can you love if you are not there? How can
Mm.
you love if you are not there? Right? And we're
That kind of hits
often,
hard, especially with our phones, because you can physically be there,
mhm,
but you're not present. Like you're not there.
no, you're not there. No. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the best gift we can give our kids, is to be able to be there, to be able to really see them, to really hear them. It goes by really quick. Now that I have an 18-year-old, I'm like, wait, wasn't she just 8? What happened? She's going to college. And it's like, yeah, how can you love if you are not there? I think it helps you in so many ways, but also for that reason, to just be present for your kids.
Mm. Do you see, that go like when we're talking about presence and technology,
Mm.
whatever the screen it is, talk to me about your work in that, like, or your teachings or your thoughts about that.
It's interesting because I just came yesterday. I was a moderator at a talk that Meta put on about social media, and for with Dr. Karen Anderson and the Meta head of safety. So I've just been thinking about this, but
Wow, that's incredible.
they yeah, it was funny though, because they're like, "Oh, you can post obviously like at this event." And I was like, "Oh, I would have to put Instagram back on my phone to be able to do that, because I don't have it on my phone, or I haven't this recently, because it's interesting because I think it really creeps up on you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, these things we were talking about for teens and adolescents. I mean, I was kind of thinking like, gosh, we should have that for parents, right? Like, they were talking about a time limit for the teen accounts. Let's say if you've been on for an hour, that that it's gonna pop up and tell you about it. I thought, my gosh, definitely adults need that. This technology scares me a little. It's really obviously here to stay, but I see people in my community who are lonely, who are less connected. I see like dads in my community who aren't going out, who don't have friends, and it's terrible for people. It's really, we are the most social primate species that ever existed on Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
we need to be connected to each other, right? Like, it fills us up enormously to be in community. So, yeah, I noticed it creeping up more and more in my own life. So, actually, I'd been talking with my daughter, my 18-year-old, my husband about it, and thinking, oh my God, I might just get a dumb phone and blah blah blah. And she sat down and she was like, Mom, give me your phone. And she went through and she deleted the New York Times, and she deleted Instagram, she deleted Facebook, she deleted all these apps off my phone. And that week was a little sort of uncomfortable.
Mm.
And then after that, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't have to just reach for this thing." You know, I can meditate every morning, and if I'm reaching for this thing in all the interstitial times, it's gonna be eroding my attention and my ability to be present. So it was really helpful to do that. And it's hard because 'cause we're all sort of individual in this in a lot of ways. We don't have collective pressure to help
The
us.
thing is, though, Hunter, like, you are a master in this, and yet it creeps up on you just like that.
Mhm.
Like, you were aware of how much your social media or, input, whatever that was on your phone, affected your presence, your mood, your emotional regulation. And the scary thing is the majority of the population is not. And they get caught in this consumption and how it affects, and it trickles down. Like, it's yourself, and then it trickles into your relationships and your family and your spouse. And what I guess my question is like, what was that moment where you're like, I think I need a dumb phone? Your daughter deleted the app, so it kind of, works a little bit more like, quote, the dumb phone. But w- there had to been something that triggered of like, oh my gosh, this is becoming a problem. Like,
Well, you get this feeling like you're it's scratching an itch, but it's just a facsimile of what you really need, right?
mm,
You
mm-hmm,
are getting news or you're getting like quote unquote connection with other people, but it's 30% of what you would happen to need to get from real people in real life or
yeah.
really connecting IRL in the world, or even just maybe, I don't know, looking at the plants in your garden, right? Like
Mm-hmm,
it's not it it's this shallow facsimile. It's not the depth and breadth of what human life should feel like. And a lot of us, like people who are older, we remember that maybe from when we were kids, when you were out in the world and you were playing and you were lost in life and presence and connecting with family and whatever you were doing, right? You remember that.
yeah.
Hopefully, kids today are also getting time like that, right? Where they are realizing the depth of experiencing what it's like to be a fully experiencing, fully conscious, like human being, right? But we are kind of like the frogs in the pot of boiling water where
Mm-hmm.
the temperature is being turned up, and what does it feel like? Is there a discomfort in your life or a lack of vibrance in your life that 10 years ago, 12 years ago was there? And if so, maybe you should check that, that level of distraction that you're you're engaging with your in your life.
Mm, I like that. It's like the slow disconnection, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where am I? Like, I got to reconnect to who I am. And so, from, a parenting standpoint, and kids getting phones younger and younger and younger, do you have any maybe research, or maybe not even research, but recommendations that you've seen? I mean, you've really grown a quite large audience, and I'm sure you've heard stories and have case studies yourself of, it's not going to be black and white of, every family should do this or not do that, but what would you recommend in a general stance of, parameters around electronics?
I mean, I definitely, if you don't get I would say don't get your kid a phone until they're maybe at least 13. And then if you do get them a phone, don't get them a fully equipped smartphone. get
Mhm.
like a bark phone or something else. I don't know, I challenge people who are worried about safety, make sure your kids know your phone number, memorize it, drill it into them, and every single other person in the world has a phone, so they can always make a phone call. It's so much easier to find one than it ever was. But
Mhm.
yeah, I really encourage people to protect childhood. Childhood should be this magical time, right? Where you can play freely, imaginatively, right? Where you can get bored and build awesome stuff out of cardboard, where you can, go wander around and get into like some good trouble with whatever at the creek or I
Mhm.
don't know. My kids, they tied a rope swing to a creek nearby and they got in trouble with the local people in the woods. But anyway, but they need that, right? Like kids need
Yeah.
that real life experience. Like they need that free play, unstructured by adults, like not soccer practice. Like they need time by themselves and with other kids where they are free to play. And that is the beauty and magic of childhood. So we need to protect that. If you're, so yeah, we have to address this like, technology, right? Like you're probably going to have it in your house. You're probably going to have it. There are people all around your kids that they're going to have it. But yeah, try to delay it, make it something that is like not, as rare as you can in your life. And I understand like we don't have the resources, families don't have the resources to, would that everybody could have an amazing babysitter. So when you to work, your kids were with an amazing babysitter would take them out to the woods, but that's obviously not going to happen. So I understand that, but yeah, try to, you know, definitely have boundaries around it, definitely teach them about it and definitely model relationship with it for yourself, right? Like
Mm.
like
Mhm.
what are you showing them? How are you showing them how to live life? Can you put the phone in the phone basket near by the door or whatever? Can it be a tool to live life rather than what you're doing when you're home? So that's really important. I mean, I think for the sake of kids' attention and their childhood, it really is something that we have to pay attention to. And we also have, we have to really, use the technology and use the different resources we have to regulate them more online and less in real life, right? Like they are pretty crazy safe in real life. There, the chance of child abductions is so incredibly low. I I've had Lenore Skenazy on the podcast, and she has a amazing statistic. You should look up exactly what it is on letgrow.org. But if you left your kid on like a New York City street for, by themselves, how long would it take if before they got abducted, according to the stats on child abduction? And it's something like 40,000 years.
Oh my gosh.
It's really very rare. They're much more likely to hit by lightning or be chomped on by a shark or any of those things. So,
Interesting.
so we need to give them, we do need to regulate them more on these devices that are like hitting that dopamine that people
Mhm.
are trying to make as sticky and addictive as possible for the attention economy and model that, but also give them more freedom out in the world, teach them how to cross the street by themselves so they can go to their friend's house or whatever it is. And you know yeah, I know this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I feel sad when when I see kids looking at phones rather than playing with each other.
Mm.
It breaks my heart a
Mhm.
little.
Yeah. We were just at my sister-in-law was just at a park and she was like, there was kids, probably like anywhere from 10 to 12. And they were sitting on a swing, swinging, but they weren't interacting with each other. They were all three looking at their phone. And
Mm.
it's just, that's heartbreaking to me. Like, that is, yeah.
Yeah, that is heartbreaking because we need to do it together, right? We need
Yeah.
to like
Hmm.
talk to the other parents in our grade when our
Mm-hmm.
kids are in 4th grade and say, hey, let's all wait until 9th grade before we give our kids phones, right? So they can actually talk to each other.
Yeah. Because I think most parents want that. Like most parents don't want their kids on screens all the time, but then you have social pressure when one kid gets a phone and then the other kid gets a phone and you're like, well, I don't want my kid to be the only person without a phone. And so there's definitely a social pressure
Yeah.
there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a interesting world. I'm not quite there yet. My oldest is, as we speak, he'll be 8 soon, but I'm getting closer and closer.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe this is the time where you're like, hey, everybody in the class,
Yeah.
like we should all band together and try not to give our kids phones until 9th grade. What do you think about it? And these are the reasons why.
Oh my gosh. My heart is like pounding fast thinking about that to
I
send
know
out
it's
to the whole
scary.
class, but I'm like, I'm going to. That'll be like a good
Mm,
challenge for me because I know a lot of the parents in his class already and they're wonderful parents. And yeah, I'm going to do that. That'll be a challenge for me. But it'll be a good one. It'll be a good one.
good. Yes. Do it. Do it, Ashley.
I love it. Okay, so you have a couple books, you have courses. What Give me some nuggets out of there and where we can find them.
Sure. Well, podcast listeners, you can listen to the Mindful Mama podcast. It's been going for over 10 years. So we have a lot there if you want some
Holy
episodes.
moly. You were podcasting before podcasting was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually have a personalized playlist quiz. So you can go to mindfulmamamentor.com/quiz and to see what you're interested in. We'll give you like your top 5 recommended
Oh,
episodes.
that's
So,
kind of cool.
because it's a lot of episodes, we know that. So you can do that. And Raising Good Humans and Raising Good Humans Every Day are found everywhere books are sold. And I do the mindful parenting teacher training and I come speak at schools and companies and things like that. So come fly me to Montana. That'll be fun.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Hunter, for joining us. All of that information will be here in the show notes on the podcast. And I know I definitely had some takeaways, and I know the audience will too. But thank you so much for your expertise. I really enjoyed our conversation, and it was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been really a pleasure too.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Love Your Life and Yourself. I hope today's episode gave you one more tool or one more truth to help you thrive in your health, happiness, and resilience. Remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's leadership. And it's the foundation for building a life that actually feels like yours. If this spoke to you, hit that follow button, leave a review, and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. And if you want to dive even deeper, grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Love Your Life and Yourself. It's the heart behind this podcast, and it's helped thousands of women step into a life they actually love. You can find it at drashleyrath.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care of you and keep choosing to love your life and yourself.